From 1985, Kid Creole and the Coconuts with Endicott. I'm Chris Cordani, and with me on Revenge of the 80s Radio is Kid Creole himself, August Darnell. August, talk about how you, Adriana Kagi, and Cody Mundi thought up and put together Kid Creole and the Coconuts.
Yeah, it was a very, very, I should say, magical time for us, because we were all living in Manhattan, which was in those days the center of the universe in terms of musical inspiration and direction. So what we did was we decided we were going to put something together that borrowed extensively from the Savannah Band, because we loved the Savannah Band. We loved the music that was created under the banner of Savannah Band. We still love the idea of 1940s retro look. So the look of Kid Creole was quite easy to accomplish. I wanted to do the same thing we had done with Savannah Band in terms of borrowing from the 40s in terms of orchestrations and horn arrangements and vocals. But I wanted to put a little more accent on the Caribbean, on some of the salsa music from the islands and some of the reggae and soca from the islands. So in addition to the Savannah Band foundation, we heaped a lot of Caribbean music on top of it. And what we came out with was this tropical-flavored album. And at the beginning of Kid Creole and the Coconuts was basically some demos that I put together at Chapel Music, because I became a Chapel Music writer during this period. And I was allowed to go into the studio and cut demos. So I was cutting these demos, putting together songs that I was writing without Stoney. And these were my early songs as a music writer. And along comes this gentleman from overseas, from England, by the name of Michael Zilka, who heard those demos and decided that they would make a great album if we put them together, and that became Off the Coast of Me. But before we even went into a rehearsal hall, we had the concept of it being a big band with horns. Adriana said, let's have some backing singers, and she came up with the idea of them being called the Coconuts, and that they should all look alike, like sisters. And Cody Mundi came up with the idea of flanking me on stage, and he being the comic foil, I being the straight guy, and the girls being the sex of it. So the formula was there even before we went into the studio to find the musicians.
That's something that has to be brought up. The importance that you put in not only the music, but the showmanship behind the music, the live shows, the actual characters, Kid Creole, the Coconuts, Cody Mundi, the rest of the band. They all had their thing. Everything was moving at once. There was a lot more to watch than just a bunch of singers.
Yeah, absolutely. This was intentional. And I think it has a lot to do with our upbringing, because we knew immediately, even with Savannah Band, didn't tour as much as Kid Creole was destined to tour. But even with Savannah Band, it was very theatrical because it was a big band. But Corey Day was the centerpiece of the Savannah Band. But with my band, we decided it would be more or less a four-ring circus with Cody Mundi, myself, the horns, the rhythm section. And so we decided at an early stage that this was going to be a very theatrical endeavor. When people came to see the show, we wanted to entertain them in the old school sense of entertainment. A lot of this has to do with, I must point out, being weaned on the cinema and loving theater and loving the productions that we used to see, the Busby Berkeley musicals and the, as I said before, the Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals and all those greater than great cast of thousands movies that we used to see. We wanted something big, we wanted something extravagant, but we also wanted to make sure there was humor involved and that it was a fun experience for the audience. And I think we accomplished that with the early band, because people would come to see the show because it was actually outrageous. So we got a reputation for being an outrageous band, and this worked in our favor.
And the Kid Creole personality, that was a big one too. Talk about how you developed that character.
That character allowed me to be ridiculous, because if anybody actually lived that way in reality, they would be frowned upon as an egotist and a person who actually was confusing reality with fiction. But with Kid Creole, I created an alter ego that allowed me to go to excess with a lot of the characteristics that I already had inside me. I've already spoken about the fact that the influence of the look came from Cab Calloway, because when I was a young man, my dad took me to the theater to the cinema to see this movie called Stormy Weather. And in Stormy Weather, Cab Calloway appeared in this extravagant zoot suit with a fedora and two-tone shoes. And I said right away, wow, that's the look I want to have. So I think I blame the cinema on a lot of what Kid Creole became. My heroes in those days, of course, Eddie G. Robinson and Clark Gable and John Garfield and Victor Mature and all these early 1940s actors. And I loved the swagger. I loved the way they talked. I loved the clothing. And I wanted to be like that. I emulated that. So the Kid Creole character is my cinematic creation. And I must point out, don't forget I majored in drama, so I was a frustrated actor. So I needed to create my own role in order to not be frustrated. And Kid Creole, to be quite honest, is merely a creation in order so that I could be an actor on stage.
Another funny aspect to that was the back and forth with the Coconuts. They weren't just straight backup singers, and they weren't just very sexy backup singers. They would go back and forth with you as sort of a comic foil.
Absolutely. They were like the Greek chorus. They were deadpan, very serious, and they cut the kid down to size. And the reason I did that was because if you had an egotistical character up front for an hour and a half of a concert, it becomes very tiresome, because every artist has an ego on stage. So, and as a matter of fact, what makes it important is the fact that the girls aren't buying his shtick. They're cutting him down to size repeatedly, and they're very deadpan, insouciant, and that became a gimmick for us, because in those days, background singers were all cheese, all teeth, all smiles, all Las Vegas, and we came along with this deadpan coconut look, and it caught on enormously in our early live shows. People loved the fact that the girls were, of course, they were incredibly sexy and scantily clad, but they had this incredible personality of cutting the kid down to size. So in a way, they also became the comic foil, too.
Talk about the effort that you and the entire band put into planning, rehearsing, and performing your live shows.
Yeah, this became, for us, this became a Herculean task that we knew we had to do. We wanted to be the best. So we'd go into the rehearsal studios, and we'd block out a month before a tour. And in that month, we were very, very disciplined and very succinct about what we wanted that band to accomplish. I had been an idol. I actually worshipped the James Brown live show. So I knew how tight a band could be, and I knew how disciplined it could be, but I knew it couldn't be accomplished overnight. It had to be, you had to have the right players, the right disciplined players, and also with the kind of music we were making, because the music was so varied and so eclectic, we had to have players who could be flexible, who could play jazz 1 minute and then play R&B the next, and play reggae and play soca and play country and western and play just about every genre known to mankind. And it took a long time for us to find the right players for this. But once we had those players, Koti Mundi would do all the arrangements, the horn arrangements in the early days, and we would come into the rehearsal studios and we would drill that band for hours at a time. I mean, we would work from 10 o'clock in the morning till 10 at night with a lunch break and a dinner break. But this went on for, like I said, 4 weeks before we hit the road. And as a result, the band became so tight that the early critics who saw the show would just admire us for how tight the band was. And then Adriana drilled the girls in the same fashion. She was the choreographer, and she put together the costumes for the girls, et cetera, and she would drill the girls in such a fashion, almost in a military fashion, to get the tight choreography that we got in the early days. And this is before the word choreography was even pronounced correctly in the music business. And Adriana was a wizard at this choreography at an early stage. And as a result, we became quite famous, even before the hit record, quite famous as an incredibly entertaining, tight, sophisticated band.
Chris Cordani here. This is Revenge of the 80s Radio. Kid Creole himself, August Darnell, is my guest. August, I'm very curious. What is your favorite Kid Creole and the Coconuts song, and why?
Whoa, that's a good question. I have so many favorites. They're like my babies. But the ones I love the most, I must admit, are the obscure ones, the ones that never really got the attention. And sometimes as a songwriter, you get disappointed because you love a song so much and it's not the one that the audience takes to. But I would say that if I had to be pressed right now at this moment, because you put me on the spot, I would say my favorite Kid Creole song is a song called The Love We Have, which is on the Tropical Gangsters album, but it was not a hit. The hits from the Tropical Gangsters album, obviously, with Annie, I'm Not Your Daddy, and Sue Pigeon, and I'm a Wonderful Thing. But my favorite one is a song called The Love We Have. I thought it was a great marriage of music and lyric. It had a nice tropical feel, and it was laid back, groovy. I thought I did a great vocal performance on it. But no one ever really mentions it. but it's my favorite.
And Gina Gina was the one you used to sort of woo Adriana a bit.
Yes, indeed. When I first met Adriana, her nickname was Gina, and we were joking because she told me that she had a boyfriend back in Switzerland, and he was a ski instructor. And, of course, I had already fallen in love with her, and I knew that I had to do something to keep her in New York because she was just visiting when she first came over, and I knew she was going to return to Switzerland. So we went into the studio, and my partner, Ronnie Rogers, and I were messing around in the studio, and we came up with this hook, Gina Gina, he's just a ski instructor. And when she heard it, that was it. She just, at that point, I believe, she said, there's no way I can go back to Switzerland now.
And history was made.
Yes, indeed. History was made in a delightful way, thanks to God.
August, while you had a plethora of international success, Kid Creole and the Coconuts didn't seem to get fair radio airplay here in the U.S. Being in the business for a long time, I have my own theories about that. But what are yours? What are your thoughts on all that?
I think that America is a huge country, and it's also a very, very disciplined, structured country in terms of the music scene. I had a lot of battles with the record companies in America because they wanted us to sound a certain way. They wanted the music to go in a certain direction. They wanted the albums to have certain songs that weren't actually in my scheme of things. So the battles continue, but I think that the whole notion of America and conquering America as a band is a very difficult thing, but I think that it really, most of it, I've thought about this for years, this question of why did it happen in Europe and not in America. And my honest answer to you is a question of luck, because with Savannah Band, we didn't try to conquer America. It just happened. And it just happened in such a quirky way, because Cherchez la Femme is not your everyday pop tune. It's a very complex musically written composition with some complex lyrics that are talking quite negatively about the female relationship with males. So I don't think it had set a formula that was going to be easy for the Americans to understand. For some reason, it became a huge success, and so did the first Savannah Band album. I think a lot of that had to do with luck, but it also had a lot to do with the timing of the period, because there was a whole disco thing going on, and for some reason, the disco denizens, the people who love to frequent discos, loved Savannah Band. But if you listen to that record today, you will see that it is not a disco record, not in the way some of the other disco hits were. So the whole element of luck comes into play. For some reason, when we went to Europe, Kid Creole and the Coconuts were accepted as legendary heroes coming from America, playing this tropical music, this dance music with a theatrical presentation, dressed to the nines and these 1940s looks with these beautiful women. It was regarded almost as a present from America for this band to come over there in that way. Whereas the Americans are a bit jaded when it comes to that kind of presentation. Let's face it, America is the land of Las Vegas and the land of Broadway and the land of Hollywood. And it takes a lot more, in my opinion, to impress the American market than it does the European market, especially back in the 70s and 80s, I would say. Now that's different because the dynamic has changed due to the whole fact that the Internet and the World Wide Web has made the world smaller. But in those days, we were looked upon as a breath of fresh air coming to Europe. We were different, let me put it that way. In America, it's a huge country, and the fact that we were playing this eclectic music, which could not be labeled, worked against us in America, but worked for us in Europe. The Americans are very fond of putting a label on something, and then they can understand it. And I have found the Kid Creole records in record stores when they still existed in America. You would find them in the strangest categories. I found some in third world music. I found some in reggae. I found some in pop. I found some in jazz. So, in other words, the American radio was confused by this eclectic blend of music and didn't know how to label it when they first received it. And I think that's what made us go to Europe. Now, I should also point out, had we stayed in America and fought the gallant fight in America, the way Savannah Band did, perhaps we would have gained success at a greater level in America. But what we did was we picked up and we went to Europe because that's where the money was. That's where the audiences were. And as a result, which is why I live in Europe now, as a result, we got stuck in Europe, and Europe became our playground. But I think everything happens for a reason, but I really do point out the fact that so much of it is random. So much of it has to do with sheer luck.
Chris Cordani here. With me is August Darnell, better known as Kid Creole. Straight ahead, we'll talk about his new album, I Wake Up Screaming, and discuss some of his other projects on Revenge of the 80s Radio.